That evening felt strange from the start. I'd been working for Ian for almost 5 years, but an invitation like this? It was out of character. Unexpected, considering his polished, almost inaccessible aura. Ian was a man people respected, feared, maybe even envied. Rumor had it he could get anything done with a mere nod or smile, and his presence often commanded a room, sending everyone's attention in his direction. I couldn't deny my curiosity when he invited me to a private dinner, but there was a thread of unease twisting through me as well. I dressed carefully, more than I would for any usual work gathering. Black dress, subtle makeup, my hair loose, falling past my shoulders. The restaurant he'd chosen was upscale, dimly lit, with an ambience that practically hummed with sophistication and secrecy. When I arrived, Ian was already seated, watching me with an intensity that I felt down to my core. His gaze wasn't just a passing glance. It was as if he were searching for something in me. I couldn't pinpoint why it felt so personal. "Good evening, Catherine," he said, his voice smooth, inviting. He gestured to the seat across from him, and I sat down, feeling the weight of his presence across the table. For a while, we made small talk, discussing upcoming projects, office rumors, nothing too serious. But every time I looked up, his eyes were there, locked onto mine, probing. It felt like he could see right through the surface, peeling back the layers to uncover everything I tried so hard to keep hidden. Finally, after the waiter poured our wine, he leaned in, his expression shifting from casual to something darker. "I know more about you than you think," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. His words hung in the air, and I froze. Was he just trying to get a reaction, or did he really know something? I forced a smile, trying to mask my discomfort. "Is that so?" He nodded, swirling his wine, his gaze never leaving my face. "I know about the tension in your marriage," he said softly. My heart skipped. I hadn't told anyone, not a single person, about the fraying edges of my relationship with Brian. On the surface, things looked fine. But beneath, there were cracks that ran deeper than I'd ever let on. How could he possibly know? "Excuse me?" I managed, my voice shakier than I'd intended. Ian smiled, not a hint of cruelty, just a quiet understanding. "Your husband, Catherine. I know he's not always faithful." He paused, watching me as if to gauge my reaction. "And I know the way it tears at you, the way you've buried it for years, hoping it would change." I swallowed, feeling exposed and vulnerable. I had spent so long hiding my pain, convincing myself that I could fix things on my own. But here he was, a man I barely knew outside of work, laying out my darkest fears and insecurities with such precision that it hurt. "I don't know what you're talking about," I whispered, hating the way my voice cracked. He leaned back, studying me with that same unreadable expression. "I'm not here to judge, Catherine. In fact, I'm here to offer an opportunity." His tone was soft but intense, a hint of intrigue lacing his words. "You deserve better than this. Better than him." The conversation took a dangerous turn as he continued, his words weaving a web of understanding, empathy, and something that felt tantalizingly close to revenge. "You know, Catherine, sometimes people don't change unless you show them the consequences of their actions," he said, his gaze holding mine steadily. "If he's going to play games, why shouldn't you?" There was a thrill in his voice, a low suggestion that sent a chill down my spine. I knew I should have ended the conversation there, stood up and left. But there was something in his words, a forbidden temptation that whispered to my wounded pride and years of simmering hurt. Ian wasn't talking about a simple act of infidelity to get back at Brian. No, this was something more elaborate, something that felt calculated, even dangerous. He leaned forward, his fingers grazing mine on the table, and whispered, "Let me help you." His voice was a soft invitation, an offer that dangled like a poisoned fruit, both tempting and terrifying. The idea of finally having power, of no longer feeling like the victim, sent a rush of adrenaline through me. "What are you suggesting?" I asked, my voice barely audible, a mix of fear and a strange, dark excitement. Ian's lips curled into a knowing smile. "Nothing you don't already want." He paused, letting his words sink in. But sometimes we need someone else to give us the courage to act. I can be that person for you, Catherine. And you might even find it liberating. That night marked the beginning of something I could never have imagined, a secret, a betrayal, but also a reclamation of the power I had given away for so long. It was Ian who planted the seed, who nurtured it with his calm assurances, his promise of discretion. He offered a path where I could take back control, where I could finally be free of the shame and resentment that had bound me for so long. And for the first time in years, I felt alive, the thrill of revenge mingling with a sense of freedom I hadn't known I craved. I didn't know where this path would lead, only that once I started down it, there would be no turning back. After that night, my mind became a battlefield. I replayed Ian's words again and again, letting the thrill and danger of his suggestions seep deeper into my thoughts, into my daily life, until it was impossible to ignore. At home, Brian was the same as ever, distant, distracted, giving me the kind of half-hearted affection that made my chest ache with loneliness. The man I'd once adored, once built my dreams around, now felt like a stranger in my own life. I saw every late night he spent at work, every secretive text message, in a new, painfully clear light. There had been too many signs, too many excuses I had let slide. Days turned into weeks, and Ian's offer lingered, pressing against me with a persistent, seductive pull. He didn't mention it again at work, didn't push me or pry, but every time we passed each other in the hallway, I felt his gaze, as if he were reminding me silently I'm here. I haven't forgotten. The temptation wasn't just about revenge anymore. It became a flicker of power in my life that I hadn't felt in years. I began to imagine myself differently, seeing in my reflection a woman who could take back her happiness, someone who wasn't afraid to seize what she wanted. It was exhilarating. One evening, long after everyone else had left the office, I stayed behind, letting the quiet of the empty halls calm my nerves. I knew what I was doing, or at least I told myself I did. As the last of the fluorescent lights flickered off, I texted Ian. He responded immediately with a time and address, no questions asked. He'd been waiting for me to reach out, waiting with a patience that felt both gentle and thrilling. The place he chose was a hidden, discreet hotel in the city, nestled behind a maze of narrow, cobblestone streets. It was the kind of place you'd only know about if you had a taste for secrets. When I arrived, Ian was already there, leaning casually against the wall by the entrance. His suit was impeccable, as always, but there was something different about him tonight, something in his eyes, an intensity that went beyond his usual calm exterior. We didn't exchange pleasantries. We didn't need to. He led me inside, his hand at the small of my back, guiding me up to a private suite. Once the door closed behind us, the air between us thickened, charged with anticipation. Ian poured us each a drink, and for a moment we just stood there, letting the silence build, until he finally spoke. "I'm glad you came," he said softly, his eyes holding mine. I felt a nervous laugh bubble up, but I held it down, trying to match his composure. "I don't know if I should be here," I admitted, my voice a whisper, though I couldn't bring myself to move, to leave. "Why not?" His tone was calm, understanding, as if he already knew every doubt, every question circling my mind. "Because if I go through with this," I trailed off, uncertain how to put into words the storm inside me. Ian's gaze softened, and he reached out, taking my hand in his. "Catherine, you're not here because of revenge. Not just that, anyway." He stepped closer, his face mere inches from mine, his voice a low murmur that sent a shiver down my spine. "You're here because you deserve to feel seen. To feel desired, appreciated. To be yourself, without apology." His words struck a chord I didn't even know was there, and I felt the weight of years of loneliness, of stifling silence, break loose. I was tired of pretending, tired of hoping that things would magically change. I wanted to feel alive again, wanted to reclaim the parts of myself I'd long buried under duty and disappointment. I closed the distance between us, letting his warmth, his presence, replace the emptiness I'd carried for so long. In his arms, I felt an unfamiliar yet intoxicating sense of freedom, a rush that drowned out every doubt, every fear. This wasn't about Brian anymore. It was about me, about rediscovering who I was. As the night wore on, we talked in quiet murmurs, laughter and secrets spilling out as we unraveled the boundaries between us. Ian was careful, attentive, his every word and gesture leaving no doubt that he understood me in ways no one else ever had. He didn't judge, didn't pry. He simply accepted me as I was, scars and all. It was a feeling I'd almost forgotten what it was like to be seen, truly seen. The next morning, as the first rays of sunlight streamed through the window, I felt a strange mixture of guilt and exhilaration. Part of me wanted to bury the memory, to pretend it had never happened, while another part, stronger, more insistent, wanted to hold on to it, to let it shape me, change me. I realized that I could never go back to the person I'd been before, never settle for the half-hearted affection that had once seemed enough. Over the next few weeks, Ian and I kept our secret meetings carefully hidden, finding stolen moments to be together, to share in the thrill of something that was ours alone. The world outside, the office politics, the daily routines, all of it faded in those moments, leaving only the rush of excitement, the sense of possibility. But it wasn't just about the affair anymore. With each meeting, each whispered conversation, Ian encouraged me to take control of my life in other ways too. He urged me to pursue my ambitions, to stop compromising for people who didn't value me. Slowly, I began to stand taller, to speak my mind without fear, to assert myself in ways I'd long forgotten how to. And people noticed. At work, colleagues began to treat me with a new respect, sensing the change, the confidence that I hadn't shown before. And then, one evening, Ian suggested something that took me by surprise. "Catherine," he said, his tone more serious than usual. "Have you ever thought about leaving Brian? Not just for me, but for yourself. To start fresh, without the weight of a broken marriage holding you back." His question hung in the air, heavy with possibility. I hadn't dared consider it, hadn't let myself imagine a life beyond the familiar, even if that familiarity had long lost its comfort. But now, as I looked into Ian's eyes, I realized that the idea didn't scare me as much as it once had. I could see myself moving forward, creating a life where I wasn't defined by someone else's choices or limitations. Over the next days, I let the idea take root, let myself imagine the freedom, the sense of agency that I'd lost over the years. The decision wasn't easy, and I knew the fallout would be painful, complicated. But for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to take back control, to build a life that was mine, no longer defined by Brian's neglect or indifference. In the end, leaving wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about Ian, though he had been the catalyst, the spark that reignited my sense of self. It was about reclaiming my own happiness, about choosing to live fully, without compromise. And as I walked away, feeling both the weight and the thrill of my decision, I knew that I was finally free. The process of leaving was anything but simple. There was a darkness that clung to the edges of every step, a bittersweet mix of liberation and grief that I hadn't expected. Ending a marriage was like pulling up roots that had been buried deep for years. No matter how damaged those roots were, tearing them up still hurt. When I finally told Brian, the conversation was colder, emptier than I'd imagined. I had pictured tears, anger, maybe even remorse, but what I got was apathy, a resigned shrug, a look of detached acceptance that hurt more than any argument could have. It was like he'd expected it all along, had already made his peace with the idea that we weren't worth fighting for. Part of me wondered if he was relieved. I asked him if he'd been unfaithful, not because I didn't know the answer, but because I wanted to hear him say it. He didn't deny it. He didn't even try to explain. And just like that, years of our life together, of memories, promises, and dreams, crumbled into something unrecognizable. I left the house that night with a few suitcases, feeling strangely lighter, even as a part of me mourned for the person I'd been, for the life I'd tried so hard to build. Ian was waiting for me when I got to his apartment, opening the door with a look that said everything I needed to hear. He pulled me into his arms, and for the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to feel the depth of my sadness. He held me as I cried, whispering reassurances, his touch grounding me in a way I didn't know I needed. In his presence, I found comfort, a calm that made the chaos of my decision feel like it was the only choice I could have made. But life doesn't stop for heartbreak, and as the days turned into weeks, I found myself learning how to navigate the world alone again. Ian was supportive, always there to listen, but he was careful not to overshadow my independence. He encouraged me to make my own choices, to create a life that wasn't defined by him or by anyone else. It was a subtle shift, but an important one. This time, I was building a foundation that was truly my own. At work, my new sense of confidence translated into my performance. I took on more responsibilities, led projects with a focus and determination that surprised even me. I poured myself into my career, using the challenges as a way to channel the flood of emotions I was still sorting through. My colleagues noticed, and soon enough, I found myself being considered for a promotion that I'd once believed was out of reach. Ian and I kept our relationship discreet at work, but I could feel the way his pride in me mirrored my own. Yet with every step forward, there was an undercurrent of uncertainty. The thrill of our connection hadn't faded, but I started to wonder what our relationship would look like now that I was free. We had shared something intimate, transformative, but we'd been bound by secrets, by the thrill of what was forbidden. Would that connection hold up in the light of day, when there was no longer anything to hide? One evening, as we shared a quiet dinner in his apartment, I found myself asking him the question that had been lingering on my mind. "Where do we go from here?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I couldn't quite meet his gaze, afraid of what his answer might be. Ian reached across the table, taking my hand in his eyes filled with that same intense sincerity I'd come to know so well. "Wherever you want to go, Catherine," he said gently. "I'm not here to decide your future. That's for you to choose." His words were freeing, but they also left me feeling unmoored. I realized that for so long, I had been waiting for someone else to shape my life, whether it was Brian or Ian, always deferring, always adapting. Now, with nothing holding me back, I was faced with the unfamiliar, daunting task of defining my own happiness. So, I did something unexpected. I took some time away. I booked a small cabin on the coast, far from the city, a place where I could hear the ocean and think clearly without any distractions. It was a bold choice, one that even surprised me, but I needed to understand who I was, to reconnect with the person I'd set aside in the whirlwind of relationships and responsibilities. During those days by the sea, I let myself unravel, peeling back layers of pain, regret, and longing. I wrote pages of thoughts in a journal, letting the ink capture all the emotions I hadn't had the courage to voice. I walked along the shore, feeling the cold wind bite at my skin, reminding me of how alive I was, how free. Ian called a few times, checking in, his voice a comforting tether to the life I'd left behind. But he never pressured me, never asked me to return before I was ready. In that time alone, I began to see our relationship with fresh eyes, realizing that what we shared was more than just the thrill of secrecy. It was a connection built on mutual respect, on a desire to see each other grow, to support each other without possession or control. When I finally returned to the city, I felt different, more centered, more certain of who I was and what I wanted. Ian welcomed me back with open arms, his smile warm and genuine, and I knew in that moment that whatever we had, it was real. It wasn't about filling a void or escaping pain. It was about choosing each other, deliberately, freely. From then on, our relationship flourished in ways I hadn't expected. We built a life together slowly, carefully, blending our worlds while still preserving our individual identities. I continued to pursue my career, eventually securing the promotion I'd worked so hard for, and Ian was there every step of the way, celebrating my successes as if they were his own. Over time, we grew into a partnership that felt both grounded and exhilarating, a balance I'd once thought impossible. There was no need for secrets, no hidden agendas, just the quiet, steady assurance that we were in this together. In him, I found a partner who didn't complete me, but rather complemented me, who respected my independence while cherishing our bond. Looking back, I could see the journey for what it was, a painful, messy, beautiful transformation. I had walked through heartbreak, betrayal, and doubt, only to emerge stronger, more whole, more myself than I had ever been. And while Ian had been a part of that journey, the real transformation had come from within, from the courage to face my own fears, to let go of the past, and to choose a future that was entirely, unapologetically mine. And in the end, that was the greatest gift of all. The freedom to live my life on my own terms, to love deeply, honestly, and without fear. Ian was a part of that story, yes, but he was not the story itself. I was. And for the first time, that was enough. As the months passed, my life took on a new rhythm, one marked by a calm, quiet strength that I hadn't felt in years. It was strange to wake up each day and feel settled. Not in the resigned way I'd once felt with Brian, but with a deep sense of self-acceptance, a confidence in who I was and the choices I had made. For so long, I had been defined by my roles: wife, employee, the woman who looked away from her own unhappiness. But now, I was simply me, and that realization filled me with a sense of power I hadn't known I was missing. Ian and I continued our relationship, but it wasn't a whirlwind or some feverish romance anymore. We had our routines, our moments of laughter, our occasional disagreements, but it all felt grounded. He was the first person I had ever been with who didn't make me feel like I had to prove anything. There was no push to change, no sense that I needed to be better to deserve his love. He saw me, and, for the first time, that was enough. With the promotion, I became more visible in the company, taking on projects that challenged me and expanded my skills. I led a team of my own, something I'd once thought was out of reach. Ian and I kept things professional, of course, though I sometimes caught his knowing glance across the boardroom, and a small, private smile would pass between us. It was our unspoken reminder of what we'd shared, of the path that had led us both here. But life, as I would soon learn, rarely allows things to remain simple for long. One afternoon, I received an email from an unfamiliar address. I opened it, expecting some routine inquiry or project update, only to find that it was from Brian. The words on the screen hit me like a punch, stirring up emotions I had thought I'd buried. He wanted to meet, he said, to talk things over. My initial reaction was anger. How dare he reach out now after everything we'd been through? But as I read his message again, a strange curiosity crept in. Brian was the one part of my life that I had left unresolved, a chapter that I had closed hastily, without truly understanding why it had all fallen apart. After much deliberation, I agreed to meet him at a small cafe across town. The air was cool and crisp that day, and as I walked to the cafe, a mix of dread and anticipation churned in my stomach. I saw him before he saw me, sitting at a table by the window, his hands wrapped around a mug, looking down. He seemed older, worn in a way that made me feel a pang of something, pity, perhaps, or empathy, though I wasn't sure why. When he looked up and saw me, he smiled, a tentative, almost shy smile that reminded me of the man I'd fallen in love with all those years ago. For a moment, I felt the weight of our shared history, the good times and the bad, all the moments that had defined us, now condensed into this one strange meeting. We exchanged pleasantries, both of us dancing around the real reason we were there. I could feel his eyes on me, taking in the changes he must have sensed, the confidence that had replaced the uncertainty he'd once known in me. And then, finally, he cleared his throat and spoke. "Catherine, I'm sorry," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know it's too late, but I need you to know that." I felt a swell of emotions rise up, but I kept my expression steady. "Why now, Brian? Why say this after everything?" He sighed, looking down at his hands. "I don't know," he admitted. "I guess seeing you move on, realizing that you're actually happier without me, it made me face a lot of things I'd been avoiding. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, Catherine, and I was too selfish to see it." His words held a sadness, a regret that I hadn't expected. Part of me wanted to forgive him, to let him off the hook, but another part, the part that remembered the lonely nights, the empty promises, couldn't simply brush it all aside. I nodded, feeling a strange sense of closure beginning to settle over me. "Thank you for saying that," I said quietly. "But we can't change what happened. We both made choices, and we have to live with them." We talked for a while longer, our conversation drifting through memories, apologies, and reflections. By the time we parted ways, I felt a sense of peace that surprised me. I hadn't realized how much closure I'd needed until that moment, how freeing it was to hear him acknowledge his part in our unraveling. I walked away from that cafe lighter, ready to leave the past where it belonged. When I told Ian about the meeting later that night, he listened without judgment, holding my hand as I shared the details. His response was simple, unburdened by jealousy or insecurity. "You did what you needed to do," he said softly, his hand warm around mine. "And I'm proud of you for that." Life continued its steady rhythm after that. Ian and I grew closer, our lives intertwining in ways that felt natural, effortless. We traveled together, exploring new cities and landscapes, collecting memories that felt like pieces of a future we were building together. I found myself laughing more, dreaming more boldly, letting go of the fears that had once held me back. But perhaps the greatest transformation was the one that took place within me. Through every step, every challenge, I became more attuned to my own desires, my own sense of purpose. I pursued hobbies I'd once set aside, painting, hiking, even taking up cooking classes that filled my weekends with creativity and joy. I rediscovered friendships that had faded over the years, building a network of people who supported and inspired me. One evening, as Ian and I sat on a balcony overlooking the city, he took my hand and looked at me with a tenderness that melted every defense I had. "Catherine, have you thought about what you want next? For us?" His question didn't scare me the way it might have in the past. Instead, I felt a deep, unshakable certainty settle over me. "Yes," I replied, my voice steady. "I want a life with you. Not one built on what we've left behind, but on what we're creating together." And so, that's what we did. We moved in together, merging our lives with a mix of excitement and ease that felt like coming home. There were challenges, of course, moments when our differences came to the surface, when old fears threatened to creep back in. But we faced them together, openly, with a commitment to honesty and understanding that anchored us through every storm. In the years that followed, Ian and I built a life that was rich, fulfilling, and deeply ours. We celebrated each other's victories, supported each other through hardships, and grew in ways that neither of us could have imagined. Our love was not the wild, consuming passion of novels, but something deeper, a steady, enduring partnership that filled my days with joy and my nights with peace. Looking back, I could see that every step, every painful lesson, had led me to this point. I had found not only a partner, but also myself, a woman who had walked through fire, who had faced her fears, and come out stronger on the other side. And for that, I was grateful. The life Ian and I built became a tapestry of small moments woven together, weekend hikes in the mountains, quiet mornings reading side by side, and dinners where we talk late into the night, our words mingling with the candlelight. Every moment felt intentional, every day a testament to the choices we'd made to be together, to leave behind what had been broken and build something beautiful and whole. But as our relationship deepened, so did my awareness of how much I had changed. I looked back at the woman I'd been, lost, uncertain, willing to settle for a love that was half-hearted at best, and felt a strange mixture of gratitude and sorrow. I was proud of the journey that had brought me here, yet I knew there was still a part of me that hadn't fully let go of the past, of the hurt that had shaped me. It was as though a small shadow lingered, just on the edge of my happiness, and I knew that if I truly wanted to move forward, I'd have to confront it. One day, while going through some old boxes that I'd kept packed away since moving in with Ian, I found a stack of photographs from my life with Brian. They were buried beneath years of old receipts, dusty keepsakes, and forgotten mementos, a history I had tucked away but never fully released. As I sifted through the photos, Memories flooded back, some sweet, others painfully bitter. There we were, smiling on vacations, celebrating birthdays, sharing moments that had once felt so precious. How could something that had once seemed so right turn so wrong? A pang of sadness rose within me, but there was no longer any anger, no bitterness. Just a quiet sense of understanding, as if I were finally able to see my past for what it truly was, a part of me, yes, but not the defining chapter. I realized that the woman I was now was shaped by those experiences, yet no longer bound by them. I decided to let go of the photos one by one, placing them in a small pile to discard. But as I did, one particular photo caught my eye, a picture of myself, laughing in a way I hadn't remembered seeing. I looked at it, really looked, and felt a strange sense of recognition, as if that version of me was reminding me of something I had almost forgotten. She was vibrant, alive, unburdened by the weight of expectations or disappointments. I kept that photo, slipping it into the pocket of my jacket, a small reminder of who I had been and the journey that had led me here. Later that evening, I told Ian about my discovery, sharing with him my bittersweet reflections. He listened, his hand warm and steady on mine, his expression filled with that same deep, unwavering support that had always anchored me. "You're not who you were back then," he said gently, his voice a soft reassurance. "But that part of you still matters. She's a part of you, too." His words settled over me like a balm, soothing the last remnants of doubt. For so long, I'd been trying to erase the pain, to move on as if it had never happened. But I understood now that moving forward wasn't about forgetting. It was about integrating every part of myself, every chapter, into the life I was creating. The next morning, I felt a new sense of clarity. My life was no longer divided into before and after. It was all connected, part of a single story that had led me to this moment. I felt lighter, as if a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying had finally been lifted. As Ian and I continued to build our life together, that clarity deepened. We made plans, talking about everything from the places we wanted to travel to the dreams we wanted to pursue. Our relationship wasn't just about the two of us anymore. It was about creating something that could sustain us both, a partnership that would be our foundation through whatever challenges the future might bring. And soon, those challenges did arrive, unexpected, uninvited, testing our strength in ways I hadn't anticipated. About a year into our life together, Ian's father fell ill. The news hit him hard, and I saw a side of him I hadn't before, a vulnerability that he tried to hide but that slipped through in his quiet moments, in the way his gaze grew distant, his laughter less frequent. He had always been the strong one, the steady force in my life, and now it was my turn to support him. I wanted to be there for him as fully as he had been for me, to be his rock in this turbulent time. We spent long weekends traveling back and forth to his family's home, where I watched him reconnect with relatives and friends, the bonds both comforting and complicated. It was a journey that opened my eyes to the depth of his character, to the way he carried his love and his pain with equal grace. Being by his side through this, I felt our connection deepen, a love that wasn't just about romance but about partnership, resilience, and shared strength. During those months, I found myself reflecting on the nature of family, of loyalty, of the ties that bind us even when they are frayed or difficult. Ian's family welcomed me, accepting me into their world with open arms, and I felt a new sense of belonging, a feeling that I hadn't realized I was missing. As time passed, Ian's father's health began to stabilize, and life slowly returned to a more familiar rhythm. But we were both changed, our relationship now weathered and tested in ways that had made it stronger, more enduring. I understood, perhaps for the first time, the depth of our commitment to each other, a bond that was as steady and reliable as the earth itself. With the support we gave each other, my own dreams began to flourish. I took on more ambitious projects at work, finding satisfaction in challenges that would have once intimidated me. My confidence grew, not only professionally but personally, and I felt myself evolving into a woman who was fully comfortable in her own skin. Ian celebrated every milestone, every victory, with a pride that mirrored my own. He wasn't just my partner, he was my biggest supporter, my confidant, my friend. One evening, as we sat on our balcony watching the city lights shimmer against the night sky, he took my hand and looked at me with a seriousness that caught me off guard. "Catherine," he began, his voice filled with a warmth that made my heart ache in the best possible way. "I want us to build a future together. Not just here, not just in this moment, but for the rest of our lives. I want us to create a life that's ours, a life that we can look back on with pride." His words settled over me, filling me with a sense of peace and excitement. I knew he wasn't just talking about the future in a vague sense. He was talking about marriage, about a commitment that went beyond promises and words. And for the first time, I felt ready to take that step, to choose him every day, to build a life together that would stand the test of time. Our wedding was small and intimate, held in the mountains surrounded by close friends and family. It was a day filled with laughter, with tears of joy, with moments that felt like a culmination of everything we'd been through. As I stood across from Ian, looking into his eyes, I felt a love that was steady, unwavering, a love that had been forged through trials and triumphs alike. And in that moment, I knew, without a doubt, that this was the life I had fought so hard to create. Our vows were simple, honest, promises to cherish each other, to support each other through every joy and sorrow. We didn't need grand gestures or flowery words. The love between us was evident in every glance, every touch, in the quiet understanding that we had found something rare and precious in each other. As we moved into our life as husband and wife, the days took on a new richness. There were quiet mornings spent sipping coffee, lazy weekends exploring hidden corners of the city, and countless nights filled with laughter, with conversations that stretched into the early hours. We were each other's home, a sanctuary that we had created from the ground up, one that would carry us through whatever lay ahead. Years passed, and our love deepened with every shared experience, every challenge overcome, every dream pursued. And as I looked back on the journey that had brought me here, I felt nothing but gratitude for the pain that had forced me to grow, for the choices that had led me to Ian, and for the life we had built together, a life that was truly, wholly ours. As our marriage settled into a steady, fulfilling rhythm, I began to realize how profoundly I'd transformed over the years. Every morning, waking up beside Ian felt like a gentle reminder of that journey, from heartbreak and uncertainty to the deep, unwavering partnership we now shared. The trust between us had been earned, piece by piece, not built on illusions, but on moments of honesty, vulnerability, and commitment. And each day felt like a gift, a continuation of the life we had chosen to build together, despite every twist and turn. Our careers thrived alongside our relationship. Ian and I both found ourselves growing in ways that complemented each other, pushing each other to new heights, encouraging one another to embrace opportunities without hesitation. At work, I took on larger roles, speaking up in meetings, leading initiatives that challenged me in ways I'd once avoided. Ian, too, began exploring a consulting venture on the side, a passion project that quickly transformed into something larger than either of us expected. Our lives became a beautiful blend of shared dreams and individual ambitions, a testament to the balance we'd cultivated. But with growth came new challenges, new questions we hadn't anticipated. As our lives grew fuller, we both began to feel the pull of something we hadn't seriously discussed before, a family of our own. It was a subject that had come up casually over the years, something we'd brushed aside with phrases like someday and when the time is right. But one evening, as we sat together on our balcony watching the city lights flicker, Ian took my hand and voiced the question that had been lingering unspoken between us. "Catherine," he began, his voice soft but steady, "do you think we're ready to start a family?" His words sent a ripple of warmth and nervous excitement through me. I had thought about this moment, imagined it, but the reality of it was something I wasn't sure I could prepare for. My mind spun through 100 possibilities. Would we be good parents? Would our relationship withstand the changes that came with raising a child? Were we really ready to expand our world in such a profound way? Looking into Ian's eyes, though, I felt a sense of certainty that calmed my fears. I knew that whatever came, we would face it together, just as we always had. Our relationship had taught me the strength of unity, of trusting in something bigger than myself, and the idea of building a family with Ian felt not only natural, but deeply right. Yes, I whispered, my heart swelling with hope. I think we're ready. The months that followed were a mix of excitement, nerves, and moments of quiet anticipation. We planned carefully, discussing everything from parenting philosophies to the color of the nursery walls. Ian's excitement was contagious. He threw himself into every detail, researching, learning, even teaching himself how to assemble cribs and baby-proof the house. Watching him prepare for fatherhood filled me with a warmth that was impossible to describe. It was as if I were seeing a new layer of him, one that deepened my love in ways I hadn't known were possible. When I finally became pregnant, the reality of what we were creating together sank in, transforming our lives in ways I could never have imagined. Every milestone, the first ultrasound, the first flutter of movement, even the small preparations, felt like magic. We spent hours imagining the future, dreaming of the little life that would soon join us, feeling a joy that eclipsed any happiness we'd known before. Yet, as our family grew, so did the pressures. Balancing our demanding careers with the needs of a growing family wasn't easy. There were sleepless nights, moments of exhaustion, and days when our patience wore thin. But through it all, Ian remained my steady anchor, a reminder of the strength we had built together. In the chaos of parenthood, we learned to find pockets of time for each other, late-night talks after our child had fallen asleep, quiet dinners on the weekends, spontaneous moments that kept our connection alive. Over time, we welcomed 2 children into our lives, filling our home with laughter, chaos, and love. The days were busy, often messy, filled with unexpected challenges and moments that pushed us to our limits. But those moments, too, were a part of the life we had chosen, the life we had created. Watching Ian as a father, patient, kind, playful, made me fall in love with him in ways I hadn't thought possible. He was everything I had hoped for and more, a partner who shared every joy and every burden, who met each day with the same unwavering commitment he'd shown me from the very beginning. As our children grew, we found ourselves rediscovering each other in new ways. We were no longer the people we had been when we first met, and yet, somehow, we had grown together, adapting to each season of life with an ease that felt almost miraculous. Our love had evolved, deepening into something both familiar and endlessly surprising, a partnership that had been tested by time and change, but that had only grown stronger. One summer, after our children had gone off to a camp for the week, Ian surprised me with a trip to the mountains, back to the place where we had first truly connected. Standing on that same hilltop, looking out over the vast landscape, I felt the weight of all we had shared, all we had built together. He took my hand, and we stood in silence, the years folding into that one moment, a quiet testament to the journey we'd taken together. "Catherine," he whispered, his voice filled with the same tenderness that had anchored me all those years ago, "I couldn't have imagined a better life than this. Thank you for choosing me, for every day, every moment." A tear slipped down my cheek as I looked at him, feeling the depth of his words, the sincerity that had always defined him. I knew, without a doubt, that this was the life I had been meant to live, the love I had fought so hard to find and to nurture. And in that moment, I felt a peace that went beyond happiness, a contentment that came from knowing I had found my place, my purpose, in the arms of a man who had seen me through every joy, every sorrow, every triumph. As we stood there, I felt the weight of our years together. The laughter, the challenges, the quiet moments that had filled our days. Our lives were rich with memories, with the love we had poured into each other, our children, and the life we had created. And as I looked out over the mountains, I knew that our journey was far from over. We had so many more years ahead, so many more moments to share, to cherish, to build upon. When we returned home, the house was filled with the joyful noise of our children, the comfort of family routines, the warmth of a life deeply, fully lived. I felt a gratitude that was impossible to put into words, a gratitude not only for Ian, but for every step that had led me here. Every painful lesson, every broken piece I had healed, every choice I had made, all of it had brought me to this life, this love, this family. And so, our days continued, marked by small, beautiful moments that seemed ordinary to the outside world, but that filled me with a quiet, unshakable joy. Our lives were woven together, bound by a love that had weathered every storm, that had grown with every change, that had been built on trust, resilience, and an unwavering belief in each other. I knew that whatever the future held, we would face it together, just as we always had. Our love was our strength, our foundation, the thread that connected every part of our lives. And as I looked ahead, I felt nothing but gratitude, knowing that I had found not only the love of my life, but a partner, a friend, and a soulmate who would be by my side through every chapter yet to come. In Ian's arms, I had found my forever, and that was more than enough. Years passed in a rhythm that felt like a well-composed song, a symphony of quiet moments and joyful noise, of shared dreams and simple routines. Ian and I grew older together, our hair turning gray, our laughter etched deeper into the lines on our faces, each day a reminder of the life we'd built. Our children grew, too, blossoming into young adults with ambitions and personalities that reminded me of our younger selves, yet carrying a strength and confidence that Ian and I had worked so hard to instill in them. As they went off to college, our house gradually became quieter. The once bustling rooms and chaotic mornings gave way to a tranquil stillness, a new season of life where it was just the two of us again. I wondered if the quiet would feel lonely, but with Ian, it felt like a return to something sacred, a rediscovery of each other without the constant demands of parenting. We found joy in this new simplicity, lazy weekend mornings, slow dinners with no one to interrupt, long walks in the early evening as the sun dipped below the horizon. One evening, Ian and I were sitting together on the back porch, our hands intertwined as we watched the fireflies flicker in the twilight. The stars were just starting to peek out, shimmering against the velvet sky. It was a moment like so many we'd shared before, but there was a sense of peace that filled me, a knowing that had settled over the years. I looked at him, really looked at him, seeing not just my husband but the man who had been my partner, my love, my confidant, through every season of life. Ian, I began, feeling a lump rise in my throat. I don't know if I ever told you enough, but thank you for this life, for everything. He turned to me, his eyes soft, filled with the same warmth that had comforted me so many times. Catherine, I've always been the lucky one. Every single day with you has been more than I ever deserved. We sat in silence after that, words feeling unnecessary. There was something profound in simply being there together, in the quiet of the night, with nothing but our hearts and shared memories filling the space between us. As the years passed, we leaned into a slower pace, relishing the freedom that came with an empty nest. We traveled to places we'd always dreamed of seeing: Italy, Japan, a road trip through the American Southwest. Each trip was a reminder of how our love had grown and evolved, how the thrill of discovery was something we still shared, even after all this time. With every new place, every new experience, I felt myself falling deeper into our life together, the memories layering one upon the other, creating a rich tapestry that was uniquely ours. But as life often does, it threw us another curve we hadn't anticipated. One winter, Ian started feeling fatigued, more than usual. It began with small things, a shortness of breath here, an extra nap there. At first, we brushed it off, blaming age and the cold weather. But as the weeks wore on, the signs became harder to ignore. His usual energy dwindled, and he seemed paler, more fragile, in a way that alarmed me. A visit to the doctor revealed what we had feared, a diagnosis that sent our world tilting. Ian had developed a heart condition, one that would require treatment and lifestyle changes we hadn't planned for. I felt the familiar swell of worry, the fear of what this would mean for us, for our future. But Ian, in his usual way, met the news with calm acceptance, His quiet strength a source of reassurance I clung to. "Whatever comes, Catherine," he said, taking my hand, "we'll face it together, just like we always have." The months that followed were challenging, marked by doctor's visits, medications, and adjustments to our routines. There were days when the weight of it felt overwhelming, when the fear of losing him gnawed at the edges of my mind. But every time I looked at him, saw the same love, the same warmth in his eyes, I felt a renewed sense of determination. We had weathered so much together. This was just another chapter, one we would face with the same resilience and love that had carried us through everything else. Ian's condition became manageable, and we settled into a new normal, one defined by slower days and an even greater appreciation for the time we had. We found joy in the smallest things: sunny afternoons spent in the garden, quiet evenings reading by the fire, shared cups of tea on the porch as we watched the seasons change. Each moment felt precious, a reminder of the life we'd built, of the love that had been the foundation of everything. Our children, now grown with families of their own, visited often, filling the house with the laughter and energy that had once been our daily soundtrack. Watching them with their own children, seeing the love and strength they carried within them, I felt a sense of fulfillment that was hard to put into words. Ian and I had done something right. We had created a legacy of love and resilience, a family rooted in the values we had always cherished. As we grew older, our roles began to shift. I became Ian's caregiver in ways I hadn't anticipated, helping him with the little things, ensuring he was comfortable, cared for, loved. It was a role I embraced wholeheartedly, knowing that every act of care was a small way to give back to the man who had been my rock, my anchor, through all the ups and downs of our lives. There were moments of sorrow, of course, days when the reality of his condition weighed heavy on my heart. But even then, there was a profound beauty in the love we shared, a love that had only grown richer with time, deepened by the challenges we'd faced. One afternoon, as we sat together by the window watching a soft rain fall outside, Ian turned to me, his hand warm and steady in mine. "Catherine," he said, his voice quiet but filled with a strength that brought tears to my eyes, "when I look back on my life, on all the moments, all the memories, it's you who made everything worth it. You were my greatest adventure, my deepest joy." I could only nod, my throat too tight with emotion to speak. I leaned into him, resting my head on his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart, a rhythm that had been the background of my life for so many years. I knew that time was precious, that each day was a gift, and I cherished every second we had, every moment we shared. In the end, Ian passed peacefully, surrounded by our children, his hand in mine. There was grief, yes, a sorrow that cut deep, but there was also a sense of peace, a gratitude for the life we'd shared, for the love that had been our guiding light. Ian's memory lived on in the lives of our children, in the laughter of our grandchildren, in the quiet moments when I felt his presence beside me, a reminder of all we had been together. After his passing, I found myself returning to the places we had loved, retracing the steps of our life together. I visited our favorite mountain cabin, walked along the shore where we had shared so many dreams, sat in the same cafe where we'd once talked about the future with stars in our eyes. Each place held a piece of him, of us, a memory that was both a comfort and a reminder of the beautiful, imperfect life we had created. In time, I found a new rhythm, a life filled with small joys and quiet contentment, with the love of family and friends who surrounded me. Ian's love had left an indelible mark on me, a strength that carried me forward, a reminder that I had been loved deeply, completely, by a man who had seen me through every season, every change. As the years went on, I often found myself sharing our story with our grandchildren, passing on the legacy of love, resilience, and commitment that had defined our lives. They would listen, wide-eyed, asking questions about the adventures we'd shared, the challenges we'd overcome, the love that had been the foundation of everything. And in those moments, as I recounted the memories, I felt Ian's presence beside me, a quiet assurance, a reminder that he was still with me in every way that mattered. My life had been a tapestry of love, laughter, and loss, woven together by the choices we'd made, the dreams we'd pursued, and the love that had endured through every trial. And as I looked back on the journey, I felt nothing but gratitude, a profound, unshakable gratitude for the life I had lived, for the love I had known, for the man who had been my heart and soul. In the end, I realized that love is not bound by time, nor by the limits of life itself. It lives on, in the people we touch, the memories we create, and the legacy we leave behind. And for that, I was endlessly, deeply grateful. In the quiet years that followed, life settled into a gentle rhythm, colored by the soft glow of memories and the echoes of laughter shared. Though Ian was gone, his presence lingered in the corners of our home, in the books we had read together, the favorite chair by the window, and the familiar scent of his old sweater that I kept draped over the arm of the couch. He was woven into the fabric of my days, a quiet comfort that reassured me, even as I navigated life without him by my side. Our children and grandchildren became the heartbeat of my world. They visited often, filling the house with joy, their energy a balm to the inevitable solitude that comes with age. My grandchildren would curl up beside me, eyes wide with curiosity as I recounted tales of my life with their grandfather. They loved to hear stories of our adventures, our shared dreams, the moments that had bound us so deeply. In their eager questions, in their laughter, I saw glimpses of Ian, the same spark, the same kindness and resilience. And when the house grew quiet again, I would sit by the window, watching the seasons change, content in the simplicity of it all. I realized that I had everything I needed, that my life had been rich and full, marked by a love so profound it had left a lasting imprint on me. The memories of Ian, of our journey, were my constant companions, shaping each day with a sense of purpose and peace. One autumn afternoon, as the leaves turned shades of amber and crimson, I felt a deep sense of stillness, a gentle release, as if I were being drawn into something larger, something that promised reunion. I closed my eyes, feeling the warmth of the sun on my face, and in that quiet moment, I could almost feel Ian's hand in mine, steady and sure, as it had been through all the years. When my time finally came, it was gentle, like drifting into a familiar dream. Surrounded by the love of family, I felt no fear, only a profound sense of gratitude. As I took my last breath, I felt Ian's presence more vividly than ever, his love guiding me into whatever lay beyond. And so, our story continued, no longer bound by the world, but carried forward in the memories we had made, in the love that had filled our days, and in the legacy of family that we had left behind. Our journey was complete, yet in a way, it was eternal, a love that would live on, carried by those who knew us, by the lives we had touched, and by the quiet, unending beauty of the life we had built together.